Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dean Gus Speth, the Dean of the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies here at Yale, a friend of many years, a fellow environmentalist. For many, many years we struggled. And then in the year 2000, I had the privilege of being invited by the Dean and Yale to come here and share my experiences of working at grassroots level for the environment with the students of forestry and environmental studies. It was a most important part of my life. Never in my dreams did I think I would ever have my steps here at Yale. I didn't have the credentials that bring you here at Yale, that I can tell you. And so for me, it was such a great honor and such a great privilege. And it really changed my life, because when I was here, it was like I was going to college all over again. And although I was sharing my experience with the students, I was learning more than they were learning from me. I was learning from them, and indeed from the wonderful and exceptional academic environment here at Yale. I still talk to people about it, especially when I'm talking in Nairobi or in Kenya, in East Africa, trying to tell people that you can really not quite understand the spirit of Yale until you come here and you stay here and you share that spirit. And I want to thank the Dean and Yale community for having given me that opportunity to be here for those six months. During that time, I shared the experience of how I started the Greenbelt movement. Really not started a movement. When I first started, I wasn't starting a movement. I was starting a project because it was 1974, and the world was preparing to go to Mexico for the very first international conference, UN International Conference on Women. It was those women in Mexico in 1975 who declared the Women Decade, 75 to 85, and 85 to 95. In 85, they came to Nairobi, and they decided 10 years was not enough. So they declared another decade. And in 95, they went to Berlin. And then they decided they will from henceforth celebrate from New York. So the women have been meeting ever since. But every one of the women who participated in those very momentous times in the 70s really have seen how the world has changed as opportunities for the girl child has changed. But during that time, we were listening and planning how we would go to Mexico. And I was listening as a member of the National Council of Women of Kenya, where all women from all aspects met. And although I went there as a member of the women academic in the University of Nairobi, with my own baggage as a woman academician struggling to make a place for me in the university, in a very male-dominated institution, when I got to the National Council of Women and listened to the women talking, I realized that they were talking about very basic needs. They were talking about food. How do we get adequate food, nutritious food? How do we get clean drinking water? How do we get energy, which is the main source, which is firewood? Even to this day, the main source of energy for rural populations. How do we put money in our pockets, women said, even though many of them came from areas where they were growing cash crops. But these cash crops are registered in the name of their male partners, husbands, fathers, and therefore the money was not going into the women's pockets. So women were wondering, how do we get ourselves some income in our pockets. These were the issues that the women were raising. And then I realized that what I was really talking about as an academic member of staff was I was pursuing luxury. I was pursuing luxury when these women, who represented more than 70% of the population, were pursuing needs, basic needs. So my emphasis changed, and I started asking the women that we do something. I don't know why I did that. I sometimes think that when you have spent years in the university, you learn to solve problems. That's what mainly we learn in the universities, I think, is to solve problems. We have already learned how to read and write. So we are trying to learn how do you solve problems. And we hope that when we go out there, we can be part and parcel of the world that solves problems for humanity. So as I was thinking to the women, I thought, well, how do you solve the problems that the women are talking about? They're talking about an environment that is degraded, an environment that has lost a lot of its forests, an environment that is quickly losing its clean drinking water, an environment that is losing its topsoil and the capacity to produce food, an environment that is not able to sustain the rural populations. So what we need to do is rehabilitate this environment. And immediately, I thought of a tree. And I'm quite sure it's because I had done biology in college. And ecosystems were a natural way of thinking. So I thought, if we have trees, we will hold the soil in place, so we will stop soil erosion. We will give the women firewood. And if we plant fruit trees, we'll give them food. We'll supplement their diets. And because we are in the tropics and trees grow very fast, they will be able to sell. And within 5 to 10 years, they can put money in their pockets. I also thought that we can also be creative. If these women grow trees and plant them on their farms, if they can make those trees survive, which is the biggest challenge for those who plant trees, then we could compensate these women for every tree that survives. And that would help put money in their pockets. But I needed the money. So I started asking for my friends to give me money. Many of them were not rich friends. So I started realizing that to make those women have an incentive, something to sustain their interest, before I could get them together and educate them on the need to do it, not only because it's good for them, but also because it's good for the country, it's good for the future generations. I will look for money, and I will compensate the women for every tree that survives. And at that time, we were talking about a small project in the National Council of Women. Well, gradually, it emerged that this was a great need, that there was a great interest, that people wanted to plant trees, but they did not know how, because we had come to believe that only foresters can plant trees, and God, of course. God wasn't planting fast enough. Foresters weren't planting fast enough, so we thought the women need to come in and help. And in the beginning, the foresters had a problem because our foresters are actually trained to establish commercial plantations. And this is a problem we have even today as part of our environmental issues in our country, that we have foresters who are trained to establish commercial plantations of trees that are mainly from the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. Mostly from the southern hemisphere is the eucalyptus, and in the northern hemisphere is the pines. These trees grow on the mountains. So when the British came and they were trying to develop the colony, they established a system which has now become a problem, because they came and they clear-cut the indigenous forests, and they replaced them with these exotic plantations. And the forestry school is largely producing managers of such plantations. And the first thing that comes to these foresters is money. How to make money from it. When they see a tree, they see timber. And they see timber industry, furniture industry, building industry. They don't see conservation. Conservation is something that is only now trying very hard to creep into their thinking. To a very large extent, they just think about these plantations. Unfortunately, these plantations, once you establish them, because you have to harvest the trees every so many years, let us say 30 years, 40 years, 50 years maximum, these plantations become farms of trees. And a farm of monocultures cannot play the same role, cannot provide the same services as an ecological system as God intended it to be, as it was created. An ecological system that embraces plants, animals, insects, birds. If you go into a monoculture forest in our part of the world, you will not hear anything except the wind. There are no bees, there are no birds, there are no animals, only humans occasionally, who have come to see how the trees are doing. And so we have a very big problem of trying to educate not only our governments, our ministers, but also our foresters, and now the communities living near the forests who have come to appreciate these monocultures because they are invited into the forest, they cultivate food crops in the forest, and as they cultivate, the foresters plant the monoculture trees, and when there is too much shade, they move away and they go to another area. So it becomes like a shifting cultivation, as we call it there, non-residential cultivation. And for those of you who may know about this system, it's competing very strongly with the issue of conservation. We're trying to say that these forests were encroached upon. They were encroached upon by the British foresters at a time when they didn't know better. The issue of conservation, the issue of environment was not there then. The issue was, how do you provide timber to a new colony that needs to develop very fast? So to try to bring in an understanding that we need conservation as well as development, that we need to manage the forest as they are sustainably, and so that we can get the services from these forests is a very major challenge. And the services that we need very much, especially within Africa, is water and rainfall. Much of Africa depends on agriculture. And many rivers come from these mountains. With the climate change, snow is melting, ice is melting from the mountains. And more of these rivers are drying up. And the volume is decreasing to the point that ordinary people can see with the naked eye that this river was flowing fast 5-10 years ago, now it's dry. Well, maybe it is not the climate change, but maybe it is what we are doing to the forests. So we are extremely challenged, and I would hope that some of the studies that could be done by the students here, maybe masters, even PhDs, is to try to see how some of these systems really undermine development, sustainable development. Because I was just sharing with a group of leadership members, the members of the Leadership Council, over lunch that the fact that Kenya, for example, is already rated a water scarce country. So for anybody to come and introduce a system that undermines the services of water from these forests or undermines the rainfall patterns in this region, to me is very short-sighted. Yet a minister of government just the other day, and I'm sure that point was directed at me because I'm howling all the time about this system at home. He said, it is very difficult for a country like Kenya to do without this system, the commercial plantations. Now, I'm sure he's thinking about today, and he's probably responding to pressure from the industry, rather than thinking long term about the need for water and the need for dependable, reliable rainfall patterns in a country that needs, that relies so heavily on agriculture. And therefore, I want to say that my time here at Yale really helped me focus very keenly on the connection between what we learn in school, very intensive learning, but what is happening on the ground. That you can have a PhD, you can have a master's, you can be very learned, but at the same time, what is happening at the ground is undermining all that you know is good for the country, for the world. And it is for that reason that I enjoy being able to touch the ground, retain that green belt movement, be able to go to the ground, work with the women, try to persuade them that it is very important for them to plant trees on their farms and not depend on trees from the forest. Try to persuade that minister, and that minister, by the way, has a degree in agriculture, believe it or not. It is also for that reason that we continue to inspire people to get involved, not to just learn, but to get involved. And in 2006, you remember we launched a campaign to plant 1 billion trees. And we asked the Prince of Monaco to be part of the patrons for the campaign. It's supported by the United Nations Environment Program and ICRAF, which is the International Center for Agroforestry, and the Green Belt Movement. Did we think that we could plant 1 billion trees? Oh, well, okay. We thought, try it. And it was really wonderful to see how governments, college students, high school students, even kindergarten kids got involved. And everywhere people were talking about, let us plant a tree. Of course, 1 billion trees may still be a drop in the ocean because of all the problems that we face in the world. But the important thing is, it was a way of raising awareness that indeed we have a problem with our environment. And it is not so much because we don't know. We have all the information, a lot of information. We ought to be very much involved, but we are not. The right decisions should be made in our offices, in our capitals, in our government offices, but they are not being made because perhaps there is not adequate awareness among the citizens in order to put pressure on the leaders. Because you know, leaders, I don't know about you here, but in my part of the world, if we don't put pressure on the leaders, they will get away with murder if they can. But citizens are the ones who eventually make their leaders change. This is why it is so important to have such a campaign as a billion tree campaign. It's to engage the ordinary people, engage citizens in every country. And of course, we also had a lot of governments that were participating. And by last year, when people met in Bali, which was almost a year after we launched the campaign, lo and behold, We reached the billion tree campaign even before we got to Bali. And it was really wonderful to be able to announce in Bali that all people in the world had indeed planted more than 1 billion trees worldwide. And I think people are having a lot of fun doing it because they decided they didn't want the party to end. They say we continue. So we are now into our 2nd billion. And I know that there are people who are only now discovering about the campaign. So we are hoping that people will continue to be excited and to be involved. And I was very happy as we were coming in, we saw some students there who said that they are involved, that they have registered. And you know, you can get onto Billion Tree campaign through the United Nations, the UNEP website, or you can also use the Greenbelt website and Greenbelt Movement, oneword.org, and you can be connected to the Billion Tree campaign and register your tree. Even if it's only 1 tree, register it. Be part of that great global party. And that is really very, very wonderful. I also now want to say something about the Nobel Peace Prize. After spending that wonderful time here at Yale and getting those wonderful recognitions and decorations from President Levin and the entire community of Yale, I guess people noticed me. I guess they had not noticed me before, but they noticed there was this woman who was in Yale, and she got a degree from Yale. Who is she? So they looked into the issue, and lo and behold, in 2004, they come and they say, wow, what she has been doing is very, very interesting. And those of you who may have studied the Nobel Peace Prize history, it has now about 100 years history. The committee always wants to bring out an issue that they think is extremely important to the world, that they think needs the attention of the entire world. And in the beginning, they were dealing with issues that had direct connection with wars and peace, like bringing people who have been fighting together and negotiating peace. But later on, they started recognizing issues that can actually undermine peace, that issues that if they are not addressed, there can be no peace. And that's why they shifted and started, for example, recognizing what many of us, I'm sure, know, human rights. For a long time, nobody was talking about human rights. But the Norwegian committee made a shift and they recognized people like Martin Luther King, people like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, de Klerk, people who were very much involved in human rights issues. And suddenly, the human rights issues became the issue of the world. And now, people who are undermining human rights issues are alone in the world. And they have a lot of pressure on them. At least we want to put a lot of pressure until the whole world recognizes that all of us have rights. And we are even beginning to move into the next realm of right, that all forms of life should be protected. They have a right to be. That we should not allow, for example, species to be hunted to extinction or poisoned to extinction or eaten to extinction, that they have a right to be. And then in 2004, the committee decided that the issue of environment had become a very big issue. And it was touching all aspects of our life. That it was no longer just an issue for a few crazy people who love butterflies and bees. That it is an issue that if it is not attended to, it can undermine peace. And what we had been trying to say is that it is very important for us to recognize that the planet we live in at the moment has very limited resources. We are very many. We compete for these resources. If we are not able to manage these resources in a responsible way, in an accountable way, we will fight over them. If we are not able to share these resources in a more equitable way, we will fight. Those who feel marginalized, those who feel excluded, will eventually rise up and create chaos as they seek for justice. And the one way in which we can make sure that this happens is if we can govern ourselves through a political and economic system that allows that to be possible. And such a system, for lack of better word, today we like to say is more democratic. It's a system that respects human rights of all. It's a system that is transparent as much as politicians can make it transparent. It's a system that is accountable, where leaders are accountable to those they lead. It's a system where people are allowed to decide who will govern over them, who will be in charge of these resources. Because for many of these leaders, when you put them in positions of authority, and I can tell you without hesitation that in our part of the world, we still are fighting that basic understanding that leaders have, that when you put them in positions of authority, they think you have given them full ownership of all the resources on the land. And they think they can do with those resources as they please. But the reality is they are custodians. They need to understand that they are custodians and they are managing those resources on our behalf. Now we need a system, a political system, an economic system that gives us an opportunity to hold them accountable. And that system, as I say, we call it democratic, but it can be translated in many ways according to where people are. But basically, we all recognize that it is a system that promotes justice, fairness, respects the diversity that is part of our human family. And the committee wanted to emphasize, therefore, that we need to work by preempting the reasons why we go to war, preempting the causes of conflict. And that is true whether you are talking about a small country like Kenya, which, as you all know, was in a conflict since January. And this conflict was actually driven by inequitable distribution of land resource in Kenya, and generally of opportunities in Kenya. And therefore creates a very large number of poor people, very unhappy people, who were very easily incited by politicians who suddenly lost elections or were made to lose elections. And so, if we want to live in peace, this is what the Nobel Committee message was. If we want to live in peace, we have to preempt the causes of conflict, work backwards. And that is the message that was given in 2004, and I was privileged, honored to be the carrier of that message. And I've been carrying that message everywhere I go. And one of the challenges that we are now faced with is, of course, the challenge of climate change, which is being addressed very adequately by the former Vice President Al Gore, who, as you know, also got a Nobel Peace Prize because of his capacity to be able to bring to our attention that indeed some of the activities that we are carrying out are undermining our capacity to survive on this planet. And some of those activities are being driven by need. Some are being driven by greed. And so it is necessary for us to recall the words of Mahatma Gandhi, that there is enough for every man's need. Remember, I started this campaign to meet the felt needs of women. When it is need, it can be met. But it's very difficult to meet and to satisfy greed. And we need to fight that wherever we come across it. Sometimes it demonstrates itself very openly, sometimes it doesn't. And so the climate change issue has driven us to campaign for the protection of forests. And I'm very happy to have accepted an invitation by the heads of states of the Central African countries, 10 countries who came together, and they said that they want to protect the Congo forest ecosystem. And I was very happy to meet somebody from the Congo DRC. That's one of the countries that have come together. And they formed a partnership along with other donors, mainly from Europe, also America, to try to protect that ecosystem. That is one of the 3 main lungs, as we know, for the world. The others are the Amazon and the Southeast Asia forests. All of them had a lot of pressure from countries, especially the emerging, developing countries that have a huge hunger for raw materials. And raw materials in form of logs are really undermining all of these forests. And unless there is a strong campaign worldwide to stop this appetite, and especially to educate the consumers so that we demand that we shall only buy wood from sustainably managed forests, these forests are going to be destroyed, not by the locals. I can assure you the Congo forest is not being undermined by the pygmies who live in those forests. It is international trade that refuses to listen to any voice that we can raise. And sometimes even refuses to honor laws of the country. Recently, I was in Tanzania to launch a campaign to protect forests. And part of their horror is fighting illegal logging of the beautiful black mahogany in the southern forests of Tanzania, where you find mountains of logs being cut largely by the local people, but being sold to international boats that are literally lining up along the coast to carry these logs illegally, because the government of Tanzania says no logs should leave Tanzania. They should all be value added so that the government can get revenue. But with this kind of illegal logging, it is virtually impossible for us to save forests. And without such huge carbon sinks, I do not know how we shall be able to bring down the climate, let alone sustain. I want, therefore, to say that I'm very happy to be goodwill ambassador of this forest, and I go around trying to raise awareness about it. And the last time I won the ear of the British government, and the British government, through the current Prime Minister, committed $100 million to a fund to protect the Congo forest, which I think we should thank the British government for doing that. I know we do not have much time, and I know you may want to ask some questions, but I do want to say that being here at Yale and going through the beautiful and wonderful and very enriching academic experience that you have, I think that it would be wonderful for the students to go out and experience. I know it is expensive, and I know sometimes it's very difficult to implement that, but I will never forget that when I was here, Gus Speth managed to get resources for us to be able to go to Kenya with the class that I was sharing with. And they were so impressed. In fact, they came back and they said that they learned more in the field than they had learned in the classroom. And I wish that you would have an opportunity to have that experience. If you have an opportunity, take advantage of it. But in the meantime, especially when you are in college, it is, and especially this college gives you so many opportunities to get involved. Do get involved. Even if it is in simple activities like recycling. You know, the 3R campaign that I actually learned from this country. Reuse, reduce, recycle. I'm sure you can all think of something that you can do to reuse. The day before yesterday, or was it yesterday actually, we were in a college in Geneva, Hobart and William Smith, and I was very impressed by some of the activities they are doing. They have come up with innovative activities such as traveling with bikes within the campus. It's a small campus. You may not be able to do it at Yale where you have such a big population, but they have bicycles which they ride, and you leave it wherever you are going. And then when you are ready to go, you take another bike to cut down on cars. They also have mugs so that they can use the mugs instead of paper. And I was very impressed. I got some bunch of letters from kindergarten kids, and some of them told me that they no longer, when they wash their hands, they said, when I wash my hands, I don't use paper. I use the dryer so that I do not create garbage. I thought, this is great. And this is a kindergarten. So there are lots of creative things that we can do in college, and we can encourage in our communities in order to promote that reuse, reduce, recycle idea. And some of these ideas, of course, look very simple-minded, but they help us form a habit. And especially because you will be amazed, many people look up to you. You are the examples. You are the epitome of what people want to do, to be. And tomorrow you will be in the biggest offices. You will be the next presidents. You will be the next judges, the next lawyers. You will fill the offices in Washington and in every capital of the world. And most people look at what America does. And as you know, many people were always hiding behind President Bush and saying, well, he didn't sign the Kyoto Protocol, so why should we sign? And I know, therefore, that what you do matters. What this country decides matters, because so many others look to see what this country decides. So if you provide the leadership, and I know I'm talking to the people who are either providing it or will be providing tomorrow, then you know that you're not only doing it for America, you're not only doing it for your community, you are doing it for the whole world. And I want to add my comments with a short story that some of you may have heard me talk about. And I give this little story because I know that sometimes you talk like this and people feel, now what am I supposed to do? The issues are so huge. So the ice is melting in the polar regions. What am I supposed to do? It's melting in the Himalayas, in the Kilimanjaro. What am I supposed to do? The desert is spreading. Africa is supposed to be the one most negatively impacted by the climate. What am I supposed to do? Where is the Green Belt movement? They're supposed to be planting trees. Well, sometimes you can get overwhelmed, and sometimes I actually do get overwhelmed. You know, people think I have a solution to the problems. I don't. So when they come to me, I say, plant a tree. But I have a little story that sometimes I even tell to myself, and it's a story of a fire that broke out in this huge, beautiful forest, and it was raging. And all the animals came out of the forest. And they felt overwhelmed by the fire. They felt completely powerless. And they just stood there watching the fire rage, except this little hummingbird. It said, I'm going to do something about the fire. So it flew to the nearest stream, took a drop of water, and came and put it on the fire. And ran back to the river and brought another drop and kept going up and down, every time bringing a drop of water and putting it on the raging fire. In the meantime, the other animals are watching, wondering how stupid can anybody be? How does this bird think it can put off that fire? And they said, what are you trying to do? You're too little. Your wings are too little. You have a little beak. You can only bring a little drop of water at a time. But the bird wouldn't hear of it, just kept persistent, committed. And some of these animals had big, like the elephant had a big trunk, can go and bring a lot of water from the river. And they just kept asking the hummingbird to join them. What are you trying to do? And the little bird, without wasting any time, turned to them and said what I hope all of us can be able to say to each other and to ourselves whenever we feel overwhelmed. I'm doing the best I can. Thank you very much.